Greetings and welcome to the United States Transhumanist Party Virtual Enlightenment Salon. My name is Gennady Stolyarov II, and I am the chairman of the U.S. Transhumanist Party. Here we hold conversations with some of the world's leading thinkers in longevity, science, technology, philosophy, and politics. Like the philosophers of the Age of Enlightenment, we aim to connect every field of human endeavor and arrive at new insights to achieve longer lives, greater rationality, and the progress of our civilization. Greetings and welcome to our Virtual Enlightenment Salon of April 3rd, 2022. Today, we are going to feature an important discussion with our friends and allies from Ifers, the Institute for Education, Research, and Scholarships, whose president is our friend, Dr. Newton Lee, who is also the advisor in education and media for the U.S. Transhumanist Party, and he is the chairman of the California Transhumanist Party. And today we are joined by a distinguished panel of U.S. Transhumanist Party officers and members, including our Director of Visual Art, Art Ramon Garcia, our Legislative Director, Jason Geringer, our Director of Applied Innovation, David Shoemaker, our Director of Longevity Outreach, Ben Ballweg, and our member, Brent Ellman. And our special guests for today are Joshua Alexander Lev, who is the CEO of Okean Capital in London, UK, but he is currently based in Poland, and Marcela Melnic, who is the communications manager at Ifers in Los Angeles, but she's currently based in Moldova. And both of them are engaged in this effort to assist the numerous refugees who have fled from Ukraine, often in fear of their lives or because their homes have been destroyed or because they don't see a future there. So let us begin with Joshua Alexander Lev, who goes by Lev. Welcome, and please tell us a bit about your background and how you came to be involved with Ifers and with this effort to help the refugees in Ukraine, and also what are some of the stories that you've heard from these people you've interacted with?
Thank you very much there. It's a pleasure to be on your show. So my name is Joshua Alexander Lev. I just go by Lev. Most of the people here on the border where I'm situated at the moment know me by my big furry hat, which I don't actually have with me. But it's always in all my pictures and stuff. They call me Jesus with the big furry hat because I have a beard and the long hair. But my background is Russian and Australian, and I've been in Poland for about 4 years now. And when the time came that we heard about the war starting, being close to the border here, I thought it was a great opportunity to go over and help out, and especially when you hear a lot of the stories of what people, when they, the nationalists of, Ukrainians and Russians and the tension there, I thought it was a good way to give back to the people there. I've got 2 kids and a wife here in Poland, which I have left at home to come over here to the border, which is kind of hard, but it's good at the same time. I guess I came about with Ifers because a friend of mine or a business partner of mine is good friends with Newton, and they have seen what I was doing over here. And I know that, I don't know if this is a good thing to say or not, but a lot of these charities and stuff, when you have a charity and you don't donate money to them, especially the larger ones, you don't know where that money is going. Whereas with Ifers and stuff, they were directly funding everything that we were doing. And so it was a very good opportunity for me to link arms with them, given that that I was here and doing everything hands-on, and then everything that was donated through them was going straight to me, and we were doing like streams back to them of photos. We were giving them stories of families, when people come across the border, I would, get like a interview with them each and give it straight to Ifers, and Ifers would have that live. So it's kind of a way for people to actually know what's happening with the stuff that they've donated, whether it's, humanitarian products or food or bandages or even pet food we had a large donation of, or if it was money or however it was going straight to the front line basically, because we were basically there, or we are here and giving it straight in. When you go as stories of the people, I mean, I could sit here and talk to the sunrisers over here on the different stories that I've heard. We've helped, I would say, close to 80 people per day of individual people in families. It's all women and children, and every single one of them has a different story. We spend generally 2 hours or 2.5 hours with each family, whether it's a group of 4 or a bus full of people. We generally spend 2.5 hours with them, and we communicate with them the whole way. We make them feel at home. So I could go on for hours with this different stories. I don't know how much time you want to listen to them, but I'm happy to touch base on a few of the more important stories. Is that cool?
Yes, please tell us a few stories.
Okay, so there's some of the stories where, for example, there's a family that have come over. Their husband has been obviously taken away from them when they were trying to leave, because he was, fit and able to fight. So the government wouldn't let him out, as obviously stand by your country. So you have a family of one mother and 2 children. And the reason why I bring this family up first is because one of her son's name was Lev as well. So me and him bonded really well. And they were coming out of Mariupol, one of the few lucky ones that got out early. And you see, when you meet these families there, imagine this. Imagine you get told right now, while we're on this call, that you have to leave your house within the next 15 minutes. You're not going to come back to your house, and you have to take only what's important, and you're only allowed 1 bag. And that's what these people have been told, and they've come out, and they, family photos, childhood gifts, stuff like that is all left behind. So these people are coming out into a country. A lot of them don't even speak English. A lot of them only speak Ukrainian or some Russian. Some of them don't even have a biometric passport. And this family, they came across, to mum and 2 kids. She brought her sister as well, and then one of her sister's friends. And her 2 sons. So in total, it was a family of 7. And they came across, and the looks on their faces, you come there, you want to help them, and they're just devastated. When we first met them, we met them at the border, a refugee center, and they didn't know what they wanted. That one of them wanted to go back into Ukraine. The other 2 wanted to go to Poland, further north. And the kids were just like, they would hear a sound of an aeroplane, or they'd hear the sound of an air conditioning or a loud car, and they would run and hide. And this really sad. So, we meet the family, we show them, we always would come and we showed them the Ifers website on the phone, which we got translated into Ukrainian just for the purpose, thank you Newton for that, just for the purpose of being able to show these families what we're doing, and that it's not just me standing there helping them. We have a bigger picture behind us, which helped enormously, because when people see this, especially in their own language, they just feel a little bit more relaxed. And that was the most important thing for us, was to get the families to be relaxed. So then what we do is we take them from the border into the major city of Krakow, which is one of the lower cities in Poland. We put them into accommodation. They have a shower. They get cleaned up. They haven't, most of them 48 hours in the same clothing, very cold. So they're all rugged up. So you can imagine how they feel. Hold on. I'm still here. Yes. Okay. And then once they're relaxed, then we offer them solutions, because a lot of them don't know what they want. So we take them to the government registration offices. We help them to register for the government funding and the housing program, and then we would drive them directly to their new houses that the government had given them. This family, you know, when they came across, we had a live call. They called she called her husband, and you know, the looks on his face when he sees that his family and his wife and 2 kids, you know, is safe in another country, but in good hands. It's priceless. It's really priceless. There's another family of 3 sisters and 2 daughters and a dog, you know, and they wanted to go to Sweden. They came across. We took them. We put them in a hotel the first night because the bus to Sweden was the next day. The next day, we took them from the hotel to the bus. They went from the bus up to the north of Poland. They caught the ferry across to Sweden. And I think this story is actually on the website. You know, they were also from a city just near Mariupol, and her husband had been killed the day before. He was in a tank, never been in the army before, and he got drafted into a tank, and the tank got hit, and the report was that he burned alive, which is, it's not nice. And you see the look on these ladies' faces when they hear this information. You just have to do what you can. So that's why when we have had this website from Ifers in Ukrainian, it just gives them that reassurance that no matter what, they're going to be safe. And there's stories on the website there that I've showed, and what the ladies have said when they've written a message to me after they've arrived to their new country and stuff, is that when they left Ukraine, the first thing that Ifers and us gave them was a sense of hope. And as soon as someone has a sense of hope, they have the will to go on. And that's what the stories of all of the families that have come out that we have personally had hands on and helped have said the exact same thing, that you're leaving a country to another country where you don't speak the language. You don't know what you're going to face. You only have a bag. And it's always that worry of what's going to happen. And to have that hope when you first arrive, it gives them the will, you know, that they're smiling, they're happy. They almost forget about where they've come from, you know, and that's what we like to create with them. We give them a little pack of dried sausages, some wet wipes so they can freshen up, and a bottle of water so that when they're in the drive and stuff, they have something. And it creates an environment for them where they would just feel like they're in a safe place and at home. And yeah, it was really amazing. But the stories that they would tell was, I mean, some of the kids, we were in one of the hotels and the fire alarm went off, and I was like, went out on the balcony and I'm looking out, and I come back inside and the kids are hiding under the table. You know, it's sad, you know, to think that these are, you know, 6-year-old kids, and that's how they think when they hear a siren, is to hide under the table. Some of the older kids and the teenagers, you know, everyone has a different mentality of it. Some of them were saying, no, we're not refugees. We're just going on a long vacation. We'll be back. We'll be back. So everyone, you know, deals with the stress differently. We were also sending some food and water, lots and lots of van loads of water, basically fresh water we were sending in. So we would wake up at about 2 a.m. in the morning, and we would meet drivers from Ukraine in vans at, you know, secret locations, normally in a warehouse or something, where we'd load the van with water, bandages, some basic first aid equipment, and then they would take it back into Ukraine. And all of this we would share with the families as well, just so they knew, you know, what was happening. And one other important thing is, every time we would get in the van or a new family would come, the first thing I would say to them is, you know, hello, you know, my name's Lev, and Lev is a very common name in Ukraine and Russia, so they feel a bit welcome. And then I would say that, you know, I'm half Russian, but I'm here helping you. And a lot of them would be a little bit standoffish at that, because, you know, you can imagine a war where a country is invading your country, and you have a hate towards that nationality. But what it did is it created a thing that, okay, not all of them are bad. And I would always emphasize that. I speak very little Russian, but I would speak it in the car to them because they all speak it. And, you know, them hearing that from someone that's rescuing them was, it changes their mindset. And I think that's very important, especially for the way, for the rest of their lives. You know, they can't go on through life hating everyone from a country. So I think that was also good. But a lot of the stories that they had to tell were sad. We would sometimes, the older people especially, you know, they've lived all their life in Ukraine, and they would come out and they would just be crying the whole way, 2.5 hours of just crying and sobbing. And, you know, one of the families lived in a village, okay, very small village, out of anywhere of this shelling and stuff like that. But what happened in their village is a Russian fighter jet got shot down, and you don't know where it's going to land, and it crashed into their neighbor's house. So stuff like this, you know, they're neighbors from the old couple, and their neighbors, obviously, they've known all their lives, and they wake up in the morning to that explosion. No mortars, no shelling, no rockets. It was just a fighter jet had been shot down and crashed. And it's kind of that risk that that's when they decided they have to leave, because you don't know where what's going to fall, you know. So they kind of live in an anxiety, fear of, am I going to wake up in the morning? And that's why a lot of them were saying they were leaving, is even if they didn't come from a bad area, they would hear stories like that, and it just, you know, yeah, it's sad, especially when you know that they don't have a home to go back to, or a lot of them don't even know if they can go back to Ukraine or if they want to, because you don't know what the future is going to be. So yeah, that's I guess my story, and yeah.
Yes, thank you very much, Lev, for sharing those stories. Definitely quite poignant and important for those of us who are monitoring this war and its impacts to understand what these people are going through. And we've had some great feedback in our YouTube chat as well. But first, I want to point to the URL refugees.ifers.org. Please visit that page and look around, because there are many pictures there, videos, descriptions of the initiative to help these refugees, as well as a donation option. So you can give directly via PayPal, and your donation, my understanding is, will be matched as well. So this is, I think, a great page for everyone to explore once this salon is concluded. But I will share some of the comments from our viewers. Jason Mallory says about Lev, that guy is one of a kind, and Mike Lazine agrees. So there are some compliments, and Daniel Twet says refugees from tyranny end up strengthening the genetic diversity of the freer places they flee to. And I really hope that these refugees will actually find permanent homes, at least many of them, in the Western countries, because given what they have suffered in Ukraine and how they were forced to leave, if I were in their position, I would not want to go back. And part of that stems from my personal experience. I was born in Belarus. I left at the age of 9. And actually, one of the main reasons why I left was that my father did not want me to be drafted in the Belarusian military. And as a result, he arranged for me to have a very different life. And everything that I was able to accomplish, up to and including the manner of my thinking and worldview, and the ability to lead a completely peaceful life without fear of this kind of devastation, unless, of course, there's a nuclear war. But we already discussed that in a previous virtual Enlightenment Salon. But apart from that scenario, the ability to lead a completely peaceful life and not worry about having to be engaged in an armed conflict stemmed from that decision to leave Belarus in the 1990s. And I hope that many of these children whose experiences Lev described, who are now frightened because they've lived through wartime, are able to find that kind of completely peaceful life. And Mike Lazine pointed out that he agrees with me, and that it will take years for Ukraine to rebuild once Putin's forces are no longer in there. And yes, that's going to be an extremely difficult process for the people who remain, but the people who leave may actually find a better life in the countries that they emigrate to. Now, we also have with us Marcela Melnic, and before we go to the remarks from Marcela, there has been a video prepared that we can show of some of her interactions with refugees in Moldova. So let us begin streaming that video.
Hello, my name is Marcela and I work for the nonprofit organization Ifers. I'm here right now in one of the houses that we hosted 15 refugees, 10 children and 5 women.
Here we go. This is the entry. We gave them a white flour to cook. And then here is all the children playing together. This is another bedroom, the kitchen. We took a picture all together. This is few more refugees came to visit us. We hosted them in another house, and this is how they're temporarily living.
Здравствуйте, как вас зовут?
Меня зовут Юля.
И откуда вы?
Я из Одессы, из Украины.
И скажите, как ваш город, как Одесса сейчас, какая ситуация там?
Сейчас в Одессе стоят на море корабли. Много, по-моему, около 6. Вот. Они оснащены ракетами. Наше руководство военное, наши власти всех предостерегают. Вот. Говорят, что будьте аккуратны, не ждите воздушной тревоги, где-то какой-то звук, какой-то шорох, сразу бежите по укрытиям. Вот, потому что было уже много раз, что Одессу обстреливали. Вот, дом, который находится рядом со мной, разрушенный, окна вылетели. Вот, рядом находится военная часть, вот, там, где ПВО, и они стараются, значит, это дело обстрелять и всячески его уничтожить. Вот. Что будет с Одессой через пару дней, я не знаю, потому что очень все страшно, и все в панике, все в ужасе. Вот. Несмотря на то, что открылись магазины, какие-то там рабочие места, вот. Все просто вот ждут, все в шоке.
Да. И как вы сбежали оттуда?
Под обстрелами, под ПВО работала. Села в машину с ребенком своим, бросила буквально в какой-то маленький кулек документы, пару каких-то вещей, и вот мы приехали сюда среди ночи. Стояли на паланке.
А когда это происходило?
Когда это происходило, это было 8 марта.
8 марта, прям
Да, я себе сделала себе такой подарок. Убежала от войны.
Да, вот здесь и ребенок спит уже. А как ребенок справляется с этой ситуацией?
Ребенок вот сейчас, сколько мы вот тут уже находимся, 3 недели, любой звук хлопающей двери, если что-то, не дай бог, упадет, ребенок в шоке, ребенок в панике, ребенок подпрыгивает, ребенок начинает плакать. И кричит: мама, неужели и сюда, в Молдову, это все уже пришло, и прилетели ракеты. Вот. Ну, в общем, это ужасно. Это просто ужасно.
Да, стресс.
All right, so another poignant story from one of the refugees in Moldova. And now, Marcela, I would like to ask you to tell us a bit about your background, how you got involved with this initiative from Ifers, and some of the other observations that you've had while working with people over there.
Maddie, thank you for inviting me in this show. So how that happened is just as soon as the war started in February 24th, I think, everyone who could possible be able to run from the war zone, they first think they went to Moldova, which is nearby country. And there was like a lot of people, and everyone, of course, Moldovan people were trying everything what they could to help all of the refugees. So we happened to host some of them, like I show you in the video, 15 people. And we have another house where nobody is living there, so we give them that house for themselves, so they can live there and just have. We also have everyone from because it's in a village, so everyone from the village also could help with everything that's needed, like food and also. We give them also some clothing, even like we just got from other people, and just so they, because they didn't even have, so they had like just few clothes that they can change, and that's it. So they are being there, and also in another place, I need know, which is a small town. It's not far from Ukraine either, because it's like probably 1 hour and you are in Ukraine. That's how close is that city. So the school has also providing all of the housing and everyone else, so they whatever they could, even the hotels, and everyone has hosted, like I think Moldova has hosted like 320 or 350,000 people, Ukrainian refugees in the whole time, in the and Moldova is a small country. It's like 2.5 million around that. So it's been a lot of people, Ukrainian, but mostly a lot of them, they just came here just for a few days, and then they went to other countries that they can be helped, because Moldova is also one of the poorest country in Europe. So obviously we couldn't afford to help everyone in the same time. So there is a lot of help from other countries, and Romania, Poland, I think also. So this is why, my story it's very short in a way, because also Ifers, with the help of Ifers, I've been trying to help, and we also have cooperated with some other with a person who is living in Miami, and he has managed to, with our help on Ifers, has managed to have humanitarian help, like 2 jets, which one went to Poland and one was the help in Moldova as well. Yeah, this is kind of what is my story.
Yes, thank you, Marcela. Now, you mentioned 2 jets, is that correct?
Yes.
So what would they be delivering? Are these like passenger planes, or are they delivering supplies?
Yes, so it was they're delivering supplies and some medical aid, everything that is needed, because also like one of the biggest export and import in Moldova has been Ukraine. So there is a lot of like Moldova didn't have also to give to the refugees medical aid and other supplies.
Yes, thank you. That's definitely important to be able to ensure a steady supply of medical aid. We have a comment from our friend Luis Arroyo, who says he's glad the USA is doing its part in accepting refugees from Ukraine, and he believes our country should accept many more. He hopes to see the same with refugees of all types from all places, and definitely when someone is fleeing war or political persecution or economic ruin and devastation, this country historically has served as a land of opportunity for people, and it is important not to forget that. And yes, go ahead.
Sorry, I wanted to because I was speaking about this. I actually have. I'm just remembering that Ifers also has been been having a partner with California military departments in Sacramento as humanitarian aid only. Also, Okean capital, which is in London, which is Lev, the CEO. The Tel Aviv University in Tel Aviv, also with Vincent's University in Indiana, White House physician Dr. Antoine Chevalier in Washington, D.C. All those two universities has offered full scholarships for the Ukrainian students. And as well, we got like from California Governance of Emergency Services. They also were offering to the some of the Ukrainian to come into United States in California.
Yes, thank you very much. So it looks like there is a pathway, at least for some of the refugees, to make it over to the United States and pursue some education, which is always beneficial and hopefully will set them on pathways where they can shape their own destinies and not be so dependent on the geopolitical conflicts in Eastern Europe. Daniel Twet has an interesting suggestion that every property that can host a 3D printed auxiliary dwelling unit should be massively producing them. It's an interesting idea, and of course in the Transhumanist Party we support the creative application of emerging technologies to solve problems like the housing scarcity that we have here in the United States. And of course, those who live in Los Angeles would know what I'm referring to with the very limited housing supply and astronomical housing prices. I'm wondering, Marcela, if you have any thoughts on what would the housing situation be for refugees that do make it over to the United States? Would they be able to have a standard of living that's similar to what they were used to in Ukraine, which is typically essentially a high-rise apartment building with a couple of rooms, a living room, a kitchen, a few bedrooms? Would they be able to find something like that in California?
I think CalOS is going to help them have some housing and everything else that is needed for them to be able to live in California. Also, there is I'm so sure that we'll be able to have some jobs, offering jobs for them so they can have some income that will come to them. So I think it will. They can be able to help with this, all of these refugees that are willing. And some of Ukrainian, I know that I spoke with, they actually, not all of them are trying to go to United States because it's very far away. Some of them are even more closer to to Europe, as much as I know. But I'm so happy that California's governors, they willing to help these refugees that can have this taking the risk to go so far away from their house. but some of them, because of the terror they have experienced in the country, they don't even they kind of don't even want to come back there in Ukraine because of all of these memories and like bomb shotting, and they are still having post-traumatic syndrome from that, because it's like it's stress, so they're still kind of afraid of that.
Yes, and I would be too if I were in that sort of situation. I think anybody who has that experience of narrowly escaping with their lives is not going to be eager to come back. Now, the situations of many of these families are complicated, as Lev pointed out, by what I think is a terrible decision by the Ukrainian government to essentially forbid males between the ages of 18 and 60 from leaving the country and drafting them into the armed forces. And I have written extensively about how conscription is murder by lottery. And unfortunately, both sides in this conflict engage in it. The Russian army has sent conscripts, many of whom are young men who were born in this millennium, who had no idea why they were being sent to fight, and who are completely inexperienced, who were told that they were just on training exercises, and then they experienced essentially what has been a disaster of a military operation, and a lot of them were on the front lines. A lot of them, unfortunately, were killed. But in Ukraine, essentially, if you are a male within a very broad age range, you were forbidden from leaving the country and drafted into the armed forces. And unfortunately, a lot of those people, as Lev pointed out, with very little military experience, were injured or killed as well. So when these refugee families come over and you speak with them, I'm curious, how many men within that age range do you see who were able to make it out there? Because I know if I were in that situation, I wouldn't care about the prohibition. I would try to get out. So I wonder if enough of them were of that mindset that they were able to escape with their lives. And could you give like a percentage? If you see a family with children, how often do you see a man between the ages of 18 and 60 in that family?
So first day when the war started, when all the male that could possibly be able to leave the country right away, that time it was the border, they can still leave. But later on, after the one day, then it was everything closed, so the borders. And after that, I haven't seen men. They all of the women that were telling me about that they are worrying about their husbands and their brothers, and who are even fathers, have stayed in Ukraine. Some of them, they are just they wanted to help, because they wanted to get this. But regarding the Russians. Military, like army that came in Ukraine, and they were like kids. I would say they were like 18 to 18, 19 years old. They were just didn't even had any idea of what's going on. They just been sent there and like having a practice, but then it just it started. So no, I haven't seen here many men in Moldova since the borders. Some men I actually tried to. It was a very funny news that I saw that one man has tried to escape by dressing up as a woman, and it was like very funny. But in otherwise, there was no men. All of them, they left. They stayed in the country and defend the country.
Yes, and that's very tragic. Now, Lev, what has been your observation in this regard?
It's exactly the same. On the first day, there was a multitude of them, and since then, I have not seen one. Zero. Absolutely none. There was one family, which was a Middle Eastern family that was living in Ukraine, and that's the only male that I have seen. in any of these refugees that was between those ages. All the rest have been kept. But exactly what you said, I'm in agreement with that. It shouldn't be that someone with zero military experience is sent to the front line. It's equivalent, in my opinion, of what Russia was doing, or more so Belarus was doing, where I know personally from some of my friends there that were in college, and they were told, this is Russian and Belarus, and they were told that they would not pass their degree in college unless they went to fight in the war. So some of them had been drafted 2 days before they invaded Ukraine, and they went into Ukraine with 2 days experience. Otherwise they wouldn't finish their college degree.
Yes, and that is just such a tragic waste of human potential. I know a bit about this conscription system since I escaped it. And in Belarus, unlike in the United States, where there's a selective service that's currently inactive, so there is no military conscription, but in the event of a war, they have the names of people between ages 18 and 25, and they can draw them by lottery. So not even everyone gets drafted. It's essentially your bad luck if you get drafted, but only a small fraction of this pool of people in the selective service get drafted. And furthermore, I'm an old man now. I'm almost a decade older than this age range of 18 to 25. So essentially, in the US, I don't have to worry about that at all. But in Belarus, you can get an educational deferment sometimes, but you still have to have compulsory military service until you're older than age 43. So you can get your bachelor's degree, master's degree, PhD, study abroad, do postdoctoral work, and a lot of people do that. But still they can get you until you're 43. And of course, Belarus is ruled by Alexander Lukashenko. He is an authoritarian dictator. He didn't really get along with Putin, but Putin saved him from the protests that occurred in 2020. And as a result, he owes Putin right now. And people were wondering in 2020, well, why in the world did Putin save Lukashenko when he could have installed somebody else who was more favorable to Putin's interests? But now I think we see why Putin saved Lukashenko, because Belarus has served as a staging ground for Russian troops and missile systems, for instance. As far as I'm aware, troops from Belarus have not yet been sent into Ukraine, and maybe they won't be. The reason why is Lukashenko is afraid of a revolt on his hands, essentially. The people in Belarus really dislike his regime, and the young men especially probably would not agree to fight, even if they were forced to do so. So maybe Lukashenko is trying to be a bit careful and play both sides and not really send them with the risk that they will turn on him. But that remains to be seen. I hope there's further de-escalation so that this hypothesis never has to be tested. But it really is tragic for any male, even who is not a senior citizen in that part of the world, because they're constantly at risk of having their lives taken away in this completely pointless manner. But I'm wondering, of the families that you've spoken with, especially if the male members are still in Ukraine, what plans do they have to reunite with those male members, and how much more difficult does that make the planning for their future? Because if you have a family that's completely intact, well, they can go to whatever country they want to go to and not really worry as much as if they still had relatives in the war zone, essentially.
In my case, with everyone, remember how I told you that a lot of the families, the first thing they've said is that we gave them hope. So it comes back to that. When we've got them to a secure house where they've got the government aid and everything is safe, they, instead of giving up that they'll never see their husband again, the ones that still have their husbands are still believing that when the wars end, their husband will, be able to leave. A lot of them that we have helped, that's why they've stayed in Poland, so that they can go straight back into Ukraine after the war to be with their husbands. One of the families, the one I spoke about earlier, with the two sisters and the friend and the little boys, one named Lev, they went to Portugal, and they've made all the arrangements that after the war, their husband will come to Portugal with them. So a lot of them are that I've seen are making the plans so that there's hope for the future of their family being reunited. And one thing I've told them all is that if something happened, if anything happened and their husband was able to get out, that they will have my contact details on Telegram. Send me a message and I will assist to help evacuate them as well. And that gives them that feeling, even if they're in a bad area, even if they're worried every night of their husband's safety or their family members' safety, it just gives them something to believe in. And I think that's the most important for these kind of people, is to have something to believe in.
Yes, indeed. And I'm really glad that Ifers is giving them that kind of hope. So Marcela, what have been your observations in that regard? How do these families plan to reunite with any members who remained behind in Ukraine?
Well, in my experience with the people I have spoken with, they're women. I mean, they say that they are in touch with their men. Evening and the morning, they're just like, is everything all right? Like checking in constantly. So, but yes, I mean, hope is very important, and everybody is hoping that at some point, I mean, all of this nightmare is going to end, and everyone is going to reunite again, because it's really sad. I mean, I cannot even imagine. I actually have a friend of mine who is a reporter, and right now is in Ukraine doing the media for the one of Romanian TV. And showed me some pictures of what is in Kiev right now. It was just terrible. Like everything is almost destroyed. I mean, it's just the capital of Ukraine, and I'm just, and I'm also like was worrying. I'm checking on my friend, like, is everything all right? Like just say okay, like something, to know that because it's really stressful in a way to be in that position where your loved ones are, and where friends and families are in that war zone. It's very hard, but I know that having hope and having something positive thinking, it actually helps for the mind as well, because otherwise it's just you worrying about this. I think it doesn't help much. Like we need to think positive, and I think that we need to do.
Yes, thank you, Marcela. And again, definitely the more hope these people can have, the better, even from the standpoint of the quality of their day-to-day lives. Now, David, you've stated you have some experience with the draft in the US during the Vietnam War, and I would be interested in hearing some of your thoughts about that, and perhaps by comparison what some of these men would be facing. And also, if you have any questions or comments for our guests, please feel free to proceed with those as well.
Yeah, thank you, Gennady. I think the draft issue is, there's many facets to it, I guess is the way to say it. So you mentioned about being an old man. Well, maybe I've got a couple of years on you, but I wasn't during the Vietnam War. I was actually a college student, and I started out with a deferment based on college, and then through the college employment office, excuse me, ended up actually going to work for the Army Corps of Engineers in a materials laboratory, and I ended up with a occupational deferment. So I thought, well, gee, that's pretty nice. I didn't have any great desire to go serve in Vietnam. My father had been career Army, and I've seen what that life was like and really wasn't all that interested. However, the job ended up going away. Congress cut the budget funds. I ran out of money to go to school, and I ended up, because the way the draft worked in those days, they drafted from a primary age group, which I was above, but because I'd had deferments, I spent 1 year back down in the primary group with a low lottery number. So I knew I was going to be drafted. So I ended up making a conscious decision of where to serve instead of waiting for a draft, which many of my high school friends had done. And they ended up usually in Army infantry, something like that, serving in Vietnam. I took my education and applied to the Air Force and ended up working in a technical field. And actually there was no way to try to stay away from going to Vietnam once I was in the Air Force, but they needed my skills elsewhere and I never went. However, my father had spent time there years earlier, and then my younger brother spent time there during the closing days of the war. So that passed over the top of me. But back to the nuances is some of my high school friends figured they would just take whatever happened to them, and some of them went to Vietnam and some of them died. Some of them decided that they didn't want to have anything to do with that and actually left the country, many of them going to Canada. So there was some choices made by them there, because at that time, going to Canada meant you weren't coming back to the United States ever. So it's a very tough situation. In my particular case, I didn't agree with the war, but I did feel that there's a cost to citizenship and that I needed to serve, and I was going to serve in the best way possible that was hopefully beneficial to me, but still doing my civic duty. I imagine that, and it's just an imagination, but I imagine that perhaps some of the men in the Ukraine feel the same way. They have to make those types of decisions. And had the United States been invaded, I probably would have been far more interested in serving than serving in a war in a foreign land. So from the Russian perspective, maybe my experience more fits that particular situation. But the draft forces you to make hard decisions, and everyone has to make those. And from my particular viewpoint, I respect whatever the decisions that were made. So I don't know whether either one of our guests have, had any of these talks with any of the males that they may have seen. Maybe they were out of the country at the time that it happened, or maybe they decided to try to find a way to leave. But I imagine all of them have a very heartfelt, very well thought through strategy of what they needed to do, whatever they decided to do. So if there's any comments from that, I'd be interested in hearing them.
Yes, please, if you've had any conversations like that with men who have thought about this aspect and made a decision one way or another, I think that would be quite fascinating to hear about.
Thank you very much, David. When you were saying that, exactly what you said about you chose to serve in the military under your profession of college and stuff like that, instead of waiting to be drafted. That is exactly, I was thinking that is exactly what I have told several of the ladies to tell their husbands, whose husbands were engineers or computer tech or stuff like this. I said, look, don't tell your husband to wait to be drafted, because he will be sent straight to the front line. That they become soldiers, like you said, infantry. And we actually had a conversation with several of the families' husbands, like they would video call when they had the internet connection. And that's one thing that I said to every single one that I had spoken to was, what's your profession? What are you good at? And they would tell me, and I was like, have you been drafted? And like, no, we're just waiting, you know, but everyone has to do it. Some of them already had been drafted, and what they said is they got 2 weeks of training, and then they were sent. That was it. And then once they've been sent to the front line, there's no more communication with their family. It's, you know, if you come out, you come out. And I said to everyone that hadn't been drafted, go and sign up, but under the you know, the area of expertise that you have a degree in, because then the chances of you actually seeing military time, you know, you could be the guy sitting on with the tech thing, with the computer, or the drone flyer, you know, stuff like this. Like, these are different areas that if you volunteer or, you know, sign up to the military. So yes, to answer David's question, yes, we have seen that, and that is something that I recommended to them.
Yes. Yes, go ahead.
No, I was saying, and to back to you.
Yes. So it's an interesting kind of pragmatic decision that some men in that situation will make, since they can't leave the country. They could volunteer for roles that are both safer and more in line with their expertise. And I agree, anything is better than being sent to the front lines and being under direct fire. There are a lot of supporting roles in the military that don't involve that. Marcela, any further thoughts on the kinds of trade-offs or decisions that the men you've spoken with have made?
I know that my brother, he's 22 right now, and he has been, I mean, everyone here in Moldova, for example, they have to go to army war. They have at least to have like 3 months of military to study in a way, so that way whenever it's happening the war, that they are being sent as a soldiers war. So there's no much choice here. You don't have choice as a male. You have to. It's a must for every country. So I believe, I haven't spoke with Ukrainian male because of all of them. They are there, but I know from the people here, the guys, I mean, they don't have a choice. They have to. And I believe whenever it's happening as such situation as how it happened in Ukraine, and they just they have no choice. They have to go. But if they are having some other areas of expertise that they can help, then yeah, obviously it will go to other services beside on just going on frontier. But this is the scariest thing. I think it's just to be in there, and also to be a member of a family, you know, who is waiting and loving that person. It's just yeah, it's terrible.
Yes, indeed, it is terrible. And our friend Sergei Gubkin writes in our YouTube chat that for a lot of the young Russian draftees, they were sent to a highly radioactive zone in Ukraine, the Red Forest, when they were approaching Kiev from the north. And these are people young enough to reach longevity escape velocity, but perhaps they won't because of the exposure to radiation that will kill them within the coming years unless cures arrive for diseases like leukemia. And so Sergei is not optimistic that these young men will survive to the point in time when medical science would be able to turn back biological aging. And that is so tragic, because many of us here in the Western world hope personally to reach longevity escape velocity, and to see people who are so much younger succumbing to not just death in combat, but these terrible radiation sicknesses is tragic. And I will add, one of the reasons why the area of Chernobyl was vacated by the Russian forces is not just that the Russian government is trying to make a show of following through some of its promises to withdraw from the north of Ukraine and regroup, but people have actually started getting signs of radiation sickness, which means they haven't done a good job at all in containing the radiation leakage from the Chernobyl area. And that's another scary aspect of this, that in war, if you have a prior site of a nuclear accident, you don't have nearly the same safeguards or the ability to maintain it or the ability to prevent some explosive from striking that area, and then the radiation that leaks could damage a lot more people. So the nuclear risk to humankind doesn't just stem from nuclear weapons being exchanged. It also stems from these kinds of accidents where a nuclear power plant could be assailed during combat. So it's just imperative to end this war as quickly as possible. Now I want to go to questions and comments from the rest of our panelists. Let's start with Art Ramon.
Yes, I know the Ukrainian government was asking for crypto donations to fund the war. Has your organization asked for crypto donations? And if you have received them, how easy has it been to convert to fiat to fund supplies for your help with the refugees?
I don't believe that Ifers has set up a crypto donation area. That's more of a question for Newton. They have, or they haven't?
No, I was just nodding to say that this is something we could ask Newton after this salon.
I mean, I know that we have on our website the crypto where you can donate, and so I can share with you probably in comments where.
Okay.
Yes. Actually, I saw a link on the Ifers website. It is 501coin.ifers.org. So there is a matching crypto donation, a one-to-one matching crypto donation that is provided by Ifers for those who choose to contribute in that way.
Okay.
You know, I heard on the news that somebody had made like $500,000 from, they made like this little video and then they made it into an NFT and some other stuff. So that could be an idea, like that stuff on your website could be made into some of the pictures maybe, or something could be made into an NFT and, you know, sold, you
That's
know.
an excellent idea.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead, Lev.
Just to answer the question that was asked just before. Sorry, I think it was by their names don't come up.
Art Ramon.
By Art, yes, that's correct. I use a card which is connected to crypto, and when I'm here, like we have our PayPal with Ifers, and then my Okean company, we match everything 1-to-1. And when we haven't got any donations, then I'm just using my money. But I use a lot of it, I exchange from crypto, and I haven't had any problem of exchanging my crypto so far into fiat or into USDT. So there's never been a problem with any of my conversions.
Yes, that is great to hear. And I think one of the important aspects of cryptocurrencies that need to be developed in order for people to be more comfortable with using them is this ready convertibility into national fiat currencies and an intuitive interface for doing that. And it seems that more of this is happening, especially over the past year. I've observed more user-friendly infrastructure emerging. So hopefully that will mean a mainstreaming of cryptocurrencies in the fairly near future. But Jason, since you made the comment on NFTs, I will give you the floor with regard to any other questions or comments that you have.
First of all, Lev, and just wow, you know, I am floored by, you know, it's one thing to say that you're altruistic. It's another thing to be out there doing it. And if I had a hat, I would take it off. I think that's awesome what you're doing. Another one of the things I was surprised about.
Thank you.
Just how well the Ukrainians are doing. I'm wondering, have the families been? I'm sure they're paying attention to that. Have they been like, I don't know, maybe cheering, or what do they think of how the army's been doing?
Yes, they have. In fact, I think it was a surprise to a lot of the world. Everyone, I remember at the start on the 24th, and I think it was by the 25th or 26th, everyone was expecting Kiev to be taken over by the Russians, and everyone was preparing the Moldova, the bottles with the petroleum in it, to fight in the streets. I remember this very clearly. And everyone thought the Russians would be in Kiev by evening. And then they've never arrived. And I think that this is, when it comes to speaking to the refugees about this stuff, we try not to talk about anything to do with the invasion. We try and change all of their talk onto their future, onto where they're going. Because, a lot of them, they don't know if they're going back. They don't know what's happened to their home. They've got every one of them has got one loved one at least who's died because, a family member, a friend, a cousin, a distant relative, something. So we always try and, it's a good question though, because I've never actually spoken about it to any of them, because we've always tried to change the subject if any of them have talked about it. But so I honestly don't know. Maybe over in Moldova, Marcela?
Oh, you're muted, Marcela.
Oh, sorry. Can you repeat the question again?
I was just wondering if the families are paying attention to how the war is going, and if they're very excited that the Ukrainian army was doing so well. But I totally see Lev's point about not bringing the subject up, and that's probably a good idea, actually. Now that I think about it,
Yeah, I mean, it's. I think to answer to this question, I mean, I never had the time to talk about this actually, but from what I heard from them, a lot of times they don't even want to talk about this because it's very stressful. They just come out of this and just started to slowly to have like to, how to say, it's more to from all of the stress to just to calm down, and so it's this. I mean.
Yes, that makes sense, because this war was a shock to many people, including the Ukrainian government. The Ukrainian government did not believe that Putin would invade. I didn't believe that Putin would invade. A lot of Western analysts did not believe that Putin would invade because it made absolutely no sense for him to invade, and yet he did. So it was a surprise, and certainly not a pleasant surprise by any means, for these people to be displaced so suddenly when they largely did not expect this war to be coming. But Jason, to your point, it seems that the entire world overestimated the conventional military capability of Putin's armed forces, because there was a lot of facade, and underneath that facade, there was a lot of corruption. And with this corruption, the money that was supposed to go to upgrading and modernizing the Russian military went into the pockets of certain high-ranking officials. And as a result, the kinds of military capabilities that Putin thought he had were not present. And of course, his subordinates kept that from him because they wanted to steal with impunity. And this is what happens when you have systemic corruption. So that explains a lot of the reasons why the Russian invasion did not really achieve most of its goals, and why now the Russian government has to pivot and say, well, they're not planning to capture most of Ukraine. They're going to refocus on the Donbas region. But in my view, this is a good thing. It's a good thing because it narrows the scope of the conflict, while at the same time, the Russian government has to take overt public steps toward de-escalation. And my position has always been any de-escalation in this conflict is a good thing because it takes us further away from the nuclear abyss. So definitely a set of developments that I continue to monitor quite closely. But now let us go to Ben Ballweg. Ben, let's hear your questions or comments.
I wondered how the stress increased as you got closer to conflict zones. So Lev coming from within Poland to the border. And sorry, Marcela, I'm not sure where you came from to where you are in Moldova now, but any way you can share how your blood pressure increased progressively from where you started to where you are now?
At first, I went to Ukraine on New Year, and a lot of the Ukrainian were told me that Russia can invade in any minute. Like this was a New Year, and I couldn't believe. I was like, no, it's going to be all right, and they were gonna find a way to actually make it peacefully without getting in that type of. Then when this happened on the 24th February, obviously everybody was very shocked. Especially me, but my reaction right away, I was just I got numb. Like I couldn't speak with anybody much. I was just numb, and I just looked to everywhere, like all of the information that like what's happening right now, and that was like very stressful for me, obviously. And after like 2 or 3 days, I also helped some of the refugees and doing of whatever I can to help these people. So I started to feel more that I can at least have some impact on them to help with this. So I felt a little bit better, but then I'm still having this hope, like always, that it's going to end, and I don't know, it has ended. No, because I'm trying not to watch many of news because it's really very hard for my mind. I mean, it's just seeing all of these terrible things that's happening. It's just I wouldn't be able to sleep at night much. But I'm trying to just by doing good. This is how it just helps me feel better as well.
Yes, and thank you very much for the work that you do and for joining us today and for helping inform those of us who are at a much greater distance from that conflict, because I think sometimes it's a bit paradoxical. We in the Western world have more of a luxury to actually delve into the events of this conflict and take more of a detached perspective in the sense of looking at the geopolitics of it, looking at the strategy of it, thinking about what are the steps that each side is going to take, what is in their best interests, how is this likely to affect international relations, the economies of other countries, and ultimately our own safety. And I'm one of the people who has raised more of an alarm about the possibility of the war coming here if it escalates into a nuclear conflict. But there are people who are already dealing with the devastation, and often they may not even have the time to analyze it from the kinds of perspectives that we're looking at this conflict from, just because they have to deal with their survival. They have to deal with contacting their family. They have to deal with their future plans. How are they going to rebuild their lives? Now, we have a very interesting conversation in our YouTube chat that I would like to highlight. David Shoemaker wrote that Putin believed the invading force would be intimidated and forced surrender without much of a fight. This was the beginning of the failure. And Sergei Gubkin writes that Putin will go on repressions now against his military for not being up to fight with Western powers. He will not have it. There will be repressions with harsh punishments and tightening of bolts. There are already signs that a lot of the senior leadership of the Russian military and security services has been displaced. Now, the interesting aspect of this is there are going to be a lot of very unhappy senior military and security personnel as a result. So what are they going to do? Are they going to just accept their disgrace, or are they going to do something else? And Sergei Gubkin, unfortunately, he writes that this will turn Russia into a fear-based state again, and the reforms of the 1990s will go by the wayside. David writes that Sergei is correct. For Putin, it cannot be his fault. And Jason Mallory writes that Russia needs an election more than Armageddon. I would add a fair election where people are actually able to vote for the candidate of their choice, where candidates from multiple opposition parties are admitted to the ballots. Ballot access is also a huge problem in Russia, as it is in the United States, but the stakes are greater. And Russia does allow some nominal opposition parties, but a lot of these opposition parties are like the Communist Party or the Nationalists, who are in some ways even more belligerent than Putin. So Putin gets to play the role of kind of the sensible, moderate leader. But this is all essentially contrived. And of course, the communists and the nationalists are going to support the war effort. But I want to point out, and this is relevant to what Lev said before, I would say most Russians do not support this war. And the opinion polls that say that something like 70% or 80% of Russians do support this war are inherently unreliable because of the composition of those who respond. So imagine if you're living in a country where it's illegal to call the war a war, and you get 15 years in prison for doing that, and you're contacted by a pollster saying, well, what is your opinion on this conflict with Ukraine? Is it justified for Russia to send its military forces? A lot of people just refuse to answer. They'll say, sorry, I don't have time, or I don't want to talk about it. So they're out of the sample. The sample is already a biased sample. And then some people are going to wonder, who is going to be monitoring these results? They say it's anonymous, but in the Soviet Union, when you voted, it wasn't really anonymous. So how are they going to react? They're going to say what they think is the official propaganda line, even if they disagree with it. And even so, 20 to 30% of the Russian population have overtly expressed disagreement. So this is not a popular war at all. But the Russian people right now are powerless to change this regime. And many of them are living in fear, different kind of fear from the Ukrainian refugees. But they are very much afraid of what will happen to them if they speak out. In Russia, throughout Russian history, revolutions and changes in the ruling elite have never happened from the bottom up. They always happen as a result of either a revolt within the elite, or they happen as a result of a counter-elite essentially emerging and exploiting the chaos. So think of Lenin and the Bolsheviks. Russia was so disordered after the devastation of World War I that the provisional government just wasn't able to maintain power at all. And Lenin, with a small group of people, came in and essentially rallied a mob in the streets, bribed a few regiments, and took over the centers of power in St. Petersburg and Moscow. So that's how political change happens in Russia. But the people are not in favor of this war unless they have been brainwashed by the propaganda, and that's not a majority of the people. So now let us go to Brent Ellman. Brent, do you have any questions or comments for our guests?
Sure. Just first, just wanted to express my appreciation and respect for everything that you are both doing and with your organization and stuff, Lev, Marcela. Yeah, you were kind of going into it yourself, Gennady. I was just kind of wondering what the relations were just with common Russians and Ukrainians out there. If there's in the United States when we've had our wars, be it in Vietnam as we were discussing or the Middle East, there's always so much propaganda to demonize those on the other side. But I see with this conflict there's much more commonality between the forces that are fighting against one another, and it's really just coming from that top down, Putin essentially. And so I'm just kind of wondering if you see much disdain towards the other side, or if there's actually kind of like an empathy and sharing of common ground.
Thank you, Brent. That's a good question. It's actually horrible. They see each other as totally different people now. It's hard to express and say. Like even some people that I've been friends with have just no longer friends. And even I have a lot of Ukrainian friends throughout the world, and they, you'll have a call with them, or they find out what I'm doing, and they'll call me, and that people are deleting all the Russian music off their Spotify, off their phones, off everything. They've turned like so anti-Russia. It's just divided the country. That's basically what it's done, because Russia and Ukraine, they always saw each other. Ukrainians speak Russian, all of them. The Russians on the border with Ukraine, they all speak. They're all friends, and now this has just been a huge divide. And that's why I was saying at the beginning of the call that when I get in the car, the first thing I tell the people is, I'm Russian. I'm here helping you. If all Russians were bad, I wouldn't be here. But even with my Ukrainian friends, you bring up something about Russia, you bring up something in conversation, and it's instantly silence at the table. And that's something that I hate seeing, because but yeah, it's so much so, Brent, so much so. It's it's really sad, and probably the same for you, Marcela. You see a lot of that.
Here, I mean, from what I experienced, actually, I didn't see that many of Ukrainian women who has regarding Russia. I mean, they know that this is between the two leaders. The conflict, it's suffering. Of course, it's suffering the people because of their conflict, but. They don't have this division. I mean, actually, I have some family members in Moscow living, and I cannot talk to them about this also, because they obviously, even if a message or something, all they could do is just having a compassion about this, and even if they're trying to say something, they are just not going to change, because Putin has decided this is so nobody wants to change. But here women are just having compassion regarding all of this, because they see that their children are going to war from Russia's side, and they are just seeing this, and they are, as a mothers, they just feel sorry that this can happen, because they understand that this is a child, this is a brother or a child of somebody, and their parents that don't even have any idea what's happening with their children. So I didn't see the division in this from the people I have spoken about.
Yes, and thank you for those perspectives. It's interesting to note there's a spectrum of views and responses on this. And of course, I'm strongly of the view that ordinary people should not be blamed for this war because they had no hand in it. And furthermore, to blame people based on ethnic or national origin is an approach that is so completely antithetical to Western values and civilized values that if people in Ukraine want to aspire to be more Western, they really need to drop that particular habit. And it's one thing to say you want to have closer ties to the West. It's another thing to actually delve into Western philosophy and the Enlightenment and the humanist tradition and understand what it means to judge an individual as an individual. And that unfortunately has been undermined by this war. And in one respect, it's understandable that if people's lives have been damaged, if their family have been hurt, they want to find someone to blame. They want to find some outlet for their hatred. But unless that blame is directed at the actual responsible parties, it's only going to escalate this spiral of hatred and continue this cycle of violence. Now, I do want to acknowledge Alan Crowley's contribution. Thank you very much, Alan, for joining us today. And I would say to you, please, after this salon is concluded, watch the recording of the entire event because we've had quite a fascinating discussion today, and we will continue along these lines. So Mike Lazine writes, do a number of Ukrainians know that there are Russians who are not in favor of Putin's invasion, or that there were attempted protests? This information is available through Western media, which have covered the protests in various Russian cities. Unfortunately, with situations like these, propaganda exists on both sides. One cannot trust official government sources from either Russia or Ukraine because both of them try to whip up their citizens into a war fervor. And one of the tools for doing that is to kind of portray this as black and white with no nuance, and to divide the people of the two countries into the completely good side and the completely evil side. And as soon as people recognize, oh, it's more complicated than that, there's also, in many ways, a greater reluctance to fight, because why are you shooting this young conscript who doesn't know what he's doing, who is sent over to a war that he has no idea what the rationale for it is, and he thought he was there on military exercises. And it's interesting, too, early on in the war, there were scenes where if Russian soldiers were captured, they were actually being treated quite humanely by the Ukrainian side. So they were given food, they were kind of just asked questions. Some of them were asked to talk about their experiences on camera, and they were generally accommodated. The Ukrainian government set up a hotline for people from Russia to call in about the status of the young soldiers who were sent over there. But as time went on, there have been more reports of atrocities, like Ukrainian, I believe these were the so-called volunteer battalions, which are the most virulently nationalistic components of the Ukrainian army, capturing Russian soldiers, and when they're unarmed, helpless prisoners of war, like shooting them in the feet, for instance, which is just completely barbaric. There was a Ukrainian medic. Unfortunately, he has the same first name as I do, but there's absolutely no relation. His name is Gennady Druzenko. He actually studied constitutional law in the United States, and then he went back to Ukraine to set up essentially a private medical unit to help wounded soldiers. And ostensibly, he started doing this for both sides. But he had an interview with a Ukrainian channel where he said, well, I consider myself this great humanist, but I have given an order to my staff that for all Russian soldiers who are going to be captured, every one of them is now going to be castrated because these are not people, these are cockroaches. And you can find that video online. This is a person who studied constitutional law in the United States and who went over to Ukraine and who has absolutely no excuse to be acting in that way. But he was kind of whipped up into this frenzy by the hatred, by the propaganda, and became a monster. And this is what this war has been doing to people. It has led them to demonize, dehumanize, and characterize as the other people who are really quite similar to them, and people who in ordinary circumstances would be friends or at least acquaintances, and you could have had a civil conversation with them. But as this destruction and devastation continues, people, I think, seek clear-cut answers where often there aren't any. And that's the great tragedy there. So what do you think, and I know this is a complex question to ask, but what do you think the prospects are for peace in the near term, in the next few months, based on the people you've spoken with, the stories they've told you? Do they foresee a de-escalation? Do they foresee a situation where, if there's not exactly a return to normalcy, at least shots are not being fired anymore, Ukraine isn't an active conflict zone? Do you have hope for that based on the stories that you've heard from the refugees?
I don't want to give my political view on this because I've seen too much firsthand of what goes on here. And I don't feel comfortable giving my personal political view on that question. But based on the people and what they've said, I think everyone has a very high hope that that will happen. The people that have come from the more destructed areas like Odessa and Mariupol, and these areas where there's been 90% of buildings are gone. These kind of people have a lot less hope of anything. A lot of them have left Ukraine for good, but I think everyone has the high hope that the government will sort it out now that the Russian troops are withdrawing. I think they all a little bit more positive towards about an end close. Me personally, I don't believe that, but I'm not going to get into my views. But I always give hope to them and always give them the positivity that, look, all that needs to happen is, every peace talk, they're one step closer to this ending. I think at the last peace talk, even it was they had agreed to sign, the non-NATO status and stuff like this. So I think that it's going to get there, and I don't see any point in the fighting anymore. So in my opinion, from what I've seen and heard from the Ukrainian people that are coming out, then yeah, there's hope that it will end soon.
Yes, thank you, Lev, and I hope that their hopes are justified. Marcela, what have you heard from the refugees in terms of whether they have a reasonable expectation of the conflict ending soon?
Yeah, actually, exactly what Lev said. I mean, mostly the same thing was saying that some of them, even from a very from the city where it's like everything is destroyed, so they kind of have a less hope, but they still have belief that it's going to end soon, the war, because first of all, I think nothing is permanent. Like it's going to eventually is going to end, and it's sad that those leaders they have to go towards like to a lot of lives to die just to get into this tipping point of like of peaceful. to show this. I never understood the wars, like, but this is politicals and views, and who has more power, and just showing off all of this. It's very sad. But I don't know. I mean, I have hope, and I know it's going to be peace, but sometimes I just don't know, because before on New Year, when I went to Ukraine and everybody was having this like Russia can invade any time soon. I mean, it can be any day. I was like, no, I still had this hope that it's going to be, eventually it's going to be okay. But then it happened, so I don't know what's gonna happen. Nobody knows. But we all going to hope for the best, you know, and hoping that humanity is going to have the brain to not killing our own home, you know, because our the earth is suffering in the same way, because the climate change is it's big, huge right now, and with this nuclear war bombs and all of that is going to have more you know, more warmer, you know, and it's just very scary to think about the worst can happen. But having hope, it's just essential for everybody.
Yes, indeed. Thank you, Marcela. And it is indeed surreal that just over the course of a few months, our entire picture of the world has changed in such a dramatic fashion because of this war breaking out. Your comments reminded me of the statement by Karl von Clausewitz, who said that war is politics by other means. So what we see with these negotiations, which are dragging on for far too long, is that each side is trying to gain a slight edge at the negotiating table by its actions on the battlefield. So Russian military try to capture more territory, and the Russian leadership thinks this will give them the ability to force more conditions on the Ukrainian side. The Ukrainian side wants to fight back and mount as strong a resistance as possible so that they have to give the fewest concessions. But as a result, people die, and these lives are irreversibly lost, whereas questions like, well, will Ukraine become a member of NATO? Will it commit to this or that type of promise? Will it cede territory formally to Russia that Russia already de facto controls? All of these decisions are actually reversible, or they can be deferred, or there can be some sort of special arrangement worked out over time, because these commitments, these territorial transfers, they're essentially abstract. But when real human beings are dying, when real physical infrastructure is being destroyed, those are costs that in some cases are difficult to recover from. You can rebuild, but it's expensive, it's time consuming, it will set back the standard of living for generations in some parts of Ukraine. But lives cannot be regained once they're taken. So that's the great tragedy of this. And I wish that there were a paradigm shift in the thinking of political leaders. And political leaders in Eastern Europe are far, far from this. They don't understand Western philosophy. As I pointed out, they may have studied it in the abstract, but they don't really understand it. And they don't understand that the life of the individual is the greatest value. This is a principle we try to drive home here in the Transhumanist Party virtual Enlightenment salons. So thank you very much. Now, I wanted to ask both of you, Lev and Marcela, how do you foresee the Ifers program evolving over the next few weeks and the next few months? Of course, as the situation on the ground in Ukraine will change? Do you believe more refugees are going to continue to come? Do you think the flow will slow down? Or do you think maybe a different composition of the refugees will start arriving? Based on what you've been seeing, can you forecast any changes going forward?
Marcela, you first.
Thank you. I think, I mean, we, of course, IFER is going to progress because we partner with a lot of other countries, and we are just going to partner with them. That's going to grow and have this also like mind shift of helping, so ask many people to help. I think this, I see IFERS is going to progress with that.
Yes, thank you, Marcela. And now Lev.
Yes, so with IFERS, what they're doing over here is it's very sustainable. It's not only through IFERS, but it's through IFERS contacts as well, which is under IFERS, obviously. But their education side of things, the younger children that have been sent over here, we've connected them all with Newton or through IFERS to sign up for their education programs. I know that they've also, I do believe that they're also setting up a food side of things through one of their contacts over here where they do catering and stuff. So that's been a great help as well. And so their program is very sustainable in that all these people are coming over. And in one experience of this, there was a young girl, 21 years old, who had, her university had been shelled. So all of her paperwork, all of her stuff had been lost. So we brought her over and basically introduced her to the Polish universities. The Polish universities are saying, no, we need this information, we need that information. So we've introduced them to IFERS, and now IFERS are looking after that with their education program and stuff like that. We also have the School of Orphans who came over, and IFERS have helped with all of that, the education side of things and stuff. So what they're doing is a really great help, not only in the side of helping us with donations and funding and medical equipment through their access through all the people, but also to the access of what they actually do in the education side of things and that. And to answer the second part of your question about the refugee flow, it hasn't slowed down from what I can see. And I think that as Russia starts pulling back its troops, what's going to happen is it's going to give the rescue teams an advantage to come in and rescue people from basements who have been stuck in basements for a long period of times. And then those people will be evacuated. So I think in the foreseeable future, the type of people, not the type of people, but the people that are coming will change to, and we've seen a couple of these already, coming from Mariupol, especially because now they're starting to open up the humanitarian lines. The people that are coming out now are people that have been stuck in a basement for 1 week, people for 2 weeks, So that's the kind of what I see as the change coming, is that the refugees are not going to stop coming because, the Western countries are doing an immensely good job at accepting them. So they're going to keep coming, but I think that is going to change from the ordinary people that are leaving to the people that have been stuck in basements from those areas.
Yes, thank you for those observations, Lev. And certainly, I hope that those people who are rescued, who have been so heavily traumatized, will be able to find some new lives for themselves in the Western countries. I would also like to thank John H. for his generous contribution and for his contributions to our chat as well. And he also makes an important point, and this is with regard to the situation in Russia, where the people really don't have the wherewithal to overthrow the Putin regime, notwithstanding any wishful thinking from the outside. He says he remains dubious about the proposition that the people being perhaps insufficiently involved in their politics automatically translates to getting the government they deserve. And that's true. I would even apply that more broadly to the West, where even though that there is a facade of democracy here, and certainly we have much more humane politics than in Russia, there are still various subtle manipulations that really prevent people from having a voice, like the American two-party system, restrictions on ballot access, restrictions on media, restrictions on who can participate in debates, that really do limit people's options. So when people vote for the red team or the blue team, they're not getting the government they deserve. They also feel like they're being channeled into a suboptimal alternative, to say the least. So I really appreciate both Lev and Marcela spending their time with us today. And I wanted to give the opportunity in the last 9 minutes of our panel for some of the other panelists to provide some brief closing comments. What did they take away from this conversation? Let's start with Ben Bolweg.
I am going to peek at my notes. I guess I was really surprised to hear about the conscription going on in Ukraine, and I'm sad for that situation. I mean, I suppose I could have understood that having been the case, if not as an official government policy, then as a pressure from fellow country people to be like, well, you're an adult male, you should stay, right? So sad to hear about that, but I'm happy that Ukraine is doing well in fending off Russia thus far, and that the crisis hasn't gotten worse. It's still not good, but anyway.
Right. Well, the more it is possible to contain this war and shrink the territory over which it occurs, until, of course, eventually it doesn't take place on any territory. But the more we can achieve that as a world, the less likely it is to spiral out of control into an all-out nuclear war, which would be the worst fate for humanity. And Marcela mentioned climate change. Perhaps we should get the climate change activists on board with this. Nuclear war would cause much more devastating climate change than fossil fuel emissions, to be sure. Now let us go to Art Ramon for his closing comments.
Yeah, during wars, there's, you have these refugees who've abandoned their property, and it just makes me curious as to what's going to happen with all that private property. Is there going to be a lot of carpetbagging, because people aren't paying their mortgage, which is taxes, and then if you're not paying the taxes, the state can take your property away. So I'm curious as to, what's going to happen. Who's going to be the carpetbagger that goes in and starts getting all of this property? Because these investment companies, they don't have to live there. They'll just buy the paper, which represents the property. So if you have any insight into that, I kind of like to hear that.
Yes, what have the refugees been telling you regarding the property that they left behind, and what has happened to it?
From my point of view, they've just been saying it's gone. No one's really commented on what they're going to do with their land and stuff. It's not really something that we talk about with them. We try and talk about the positive and the future of their new life or how it's going to be. But that's a very good question. And I think that in just my personal view is that there's going to be some of these big hedge funds going in and moving in and just buying up all the property and becoming big landowners like in the US.
Probably. I know. I heard from all of these refugees that I spoke with, and regarding the properties, they all left it. They just I know a person who came with a big car, like 100, I don't know, it's just a very big car, and they seemed like they were living good life in Ukraine before, and then some Moldovan person has helped them to have the house because they were devastated, so they had helped him, and then he left the car to give. They actually give a gift to that Moldovan who helped them on that time of a need, gave them that car, and they left in America because they had some friends and there, so everything they left, like it just and a lot of them, they some of them, they are worrying about like what's gonna happen when they're coming back to Ukraine and see what's with their houses become. It's very sad. I mean, I cannot even imagine what's like. But some of them, they just they leave it everything there and just want to go.
Yes, it's quite a tragedy, and I imagine because a lot of these parts of Ukraine are now war zones, looters will start coming in and availing themselves of a lot of the property, and it is not going to be a pleasant situation unless somebody comes back for it or tries to rescue it, or their neighbors who remain in Ukraine help out, but they probably have other things to worry about right now. David, I'm curious with regard to your closing comments.
Yeah, thank you. Lev, Marcela, I want to say thank you to both of you for your greater work that you're doing. It's amazing. And I also want to say thank you for being here today and putting a human face on this horrible disaster and really explaining to us what's going on, what's in the hearts of these people. I thank empathy of those of us who can't be there. You're helping us receive that and share that, and hopefully we can in some way find a way to be able to expand what you're doing, whether that's by contributions, whether that's by talking about what you're doing and making others aware, whatever. I plan to do that as much as I can, and I would suspect that everybody listening to this feels in a similar fashion. So I'll just leave you with great thanks.
Yes, and I would echo that. I am going to shortly post a link for PayPal donations to the Ifers effort to aid the refugees in Ukraine. And while I do that, Brent, I'm curious with regard to your closing comments.
Thank you, Gennady. Yeah, it's definitely been heartfelt to listen to everything and hear about your experiences over there. It's, I can only express my gratitude for people like yourselves and efforts such as these in times like this. It's a dark moment in history, obviously, and to have this type of a discussion and to see people like yourselves that are motivated to step up to the plate and try to find ways to create solutions or at least mitigate some of these disasters is really inspiring. So I just wanted to express my gratitude again and appreciation for you both. It's been really interesting. Yeah, it's discussing these the cultural identity politics that are going on with the people just living there that you were explaining further for my question was really interesting and insightful, especially the differences between potentially the men and the women over there. It was interesting to consider. And yeah, just keep up the great work. And yeah, I'd love to figure out ways to get involved with similar efforts in the future. Cheers.
Yes, thank you very much, Brent. And now let us go to Jason for his closing comments.
I don't have much else. I'm just very glad that you're over there doing what you're doing. I especially feel sorry for the children. The fact that they got PTSD already, 6-year-old kids, is just terrible. But thank you. I really appreciate it, Marcela, Lev. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. I would echo that, Jason. But there is a significant glimmer of hope for the children, especially because of the educational dimension of Ifers's effort. And certainly someone like Newton Lee, who has been a key contributor to the transhumanist community, can serve as quite an inspiration for students, including young children. He and the people who work with him can open their minds to an entire new world of possibilities. And his focus on science, technology, the future of humanity can really lead these kids to grow up thinking in different directions, more constructive directions than are prevalent in the countries they grew up in. And certainly the exposure to these kinds of ideas throughout my life, but starting from my childhood, helped me become the person I am right now, helped me eventually become the chairman of the US Transhumanist Party. And I think for many of these children, if they come to have a life in the West and Western educations, similar futures may be forthcoming. And in that case, maybe we'll have some of them as guests in our virtual Enlightenment salons in the decades to come. So thank you, Lev. Thank you, Marcela, for joining us today. We all greatly appreciate your efforts. And once again, if you would like to donate to the Ifers effort to aid refugees from Ukraine, here is the PayPal link to do that. Until next week, Sunday at 1 p.m. US Pacific time, live long and prosper.